The morning mist had not yet lifted from the hills when the carriage came for Elira Voss. She stood in the doorway of her family's small stone house, watching the wheels turn slowly toward her, and she understood, with a heaviness that settled deep in her chest, that her life as she knew it was over. For 3 generations, the village of Ashwell had sent one daughter each year to the castle of the Alpha King. It was called a tribute, though everyone knew it by its true name, a sacrifice. The wolves of the Blackthorn pack were stronger than any army the humans could raise, and the elders said that peace had a price. This year, that price was Elira. Her mother would not look at her. Her father gripped her shoulders too tightly, as if holding on could change what was coming. Neighbors lined the road, their faces pale with a mixture of pity and relief that it was not their own daughters being taken. Elira walked forward because there was no other choice. She had heard the stories since she was a child, how the king was said to have the eyes of a predator and the temper of a storm, how brides who displeased him were never seen again. She did not know if the stories were true. She only knew that refusing was not an option that existed for someone like her. The carriage ride took the better part of a day, winding higher into mountains that grew colder and more silent with every mile. By the time the castle came into view, the sun was setting behind its towers, turning the stone the color of old blood. Elira's hands were shaking by the time the door opened, and she was led inside. She expected darkness, she expected chains, or a dungeon, or the growl of something monstrous waiting to greet her. Instead, she was brought into a great hall lit with warm candlelight, its walls lined with tapestries older than the kingdom itself. And there, standing at the far end of the room, was a man. He was tall, with dark hair and eyes the color of a winter sky, and he wore his authority the way other men wore coats, as though it had always belonged to him. He did not smile. He did not move toward her. He simply watched her enter, his expression unreadable, and in his hand, resting on a velvet cushion, was a wedding ring. "You are Elira," he said. It was not a question. She nodded, too afraid to trust her voice. "I am Chaol Draven," he said. "You have likely heard terrible things about me." "I have heard many things," she managed. "Most of them are lies," he said, "though I understand why you would believe them. Sit, please. You have had a long journey, and I owe you an explanation before anything else happens in this castle." Elira sat, though her body remained tense, ready to run if she needed to. Chaol remained standing, his hands clasped behind his back, and he told her a story she had never heard in Ashwell. The tradition of the tribute bride, he explained, was never his creation. It had been invented generations ago, long before he was born, by pack elders who saw an opportunity in the fear of nearby villages. They demanded a bride each year, not because it served any real purpose, but because it kept the humans compliant, afraid, and easy to control. Chaol's own father had continued the practice out of habit and pride, refusing to hear any argument against it. When Chaol became Alpha King 3 years earlier, he had inherited a system he despised but could not dismantle alone, not without risking a war among the packs who profited from the fear it created. "I cannot force you to understand or forgive this," Chaol said, "but I need you to know that marrying you is not something I take lightly, and it is not something I intend to use against you. If we marry, publicly, permanently, it ends the tradition. No more girls taken from their homes. No more villages living in fear of what might happen if their tribute displeases someone. But I will not force the marriage upon you tonight, or force anything else. You will have your own chambers, guards who answer only to you, and the freedom to leave these walls whenever you wish, though I would ask you to stay long enough to see whether this arrangement could work." Elira studied him carefully, searching his face for the cruelty she had been warned about. She found none. What she found instead was exhaustion, the kind that came from carrying a burden for far too long, alone. "Why should I believe you?" she asked. "You shouldn't," Chaol said. "Not yet. Believe me later, if I earn it." The days that followed were unlike anything Elira had imagined. She was given a room with windows overlooking the mountains, warm blankets, and food finer than anything she had eaten in her life. No one touched her without permission. No one raised a hand to her. She spent her mornings walking the castle grounds, watching the wolves of the pack go about their duties, and she began to notice things she had not expected. The pack feared Kale, yes, but they also respected him in a way that seemed earned rather than forced. He settled disputes fairly. He listened to complaints from the lowest-ranking members of his pack with the same patience he gave his advisors. When a young guard spoke harshly to Elira one afternoon, mocking her human weakness, Kale appeared within moments, his voice cold as ice, as he reminded the guard that cruelty toward his intended bride would not be tolerated. The guard apologized immediately, his face pale with fear, and Elira realized that Kale's reputation as fearsome was not built on cruelty toward the weak, but on an unwillingness to let anyone else be cruel either. Slowly, cautiously, Elira began to lower her guard. She learned that Kale remembered small details about her, the way she preferred her tea without sugar, the fact that she missed the sound of the river near her home, the names of her younger siblings she had mentioned only once. He was not a man who spoke often, but when he did, his words carried weight. He was not affectionate in the way she might have imagined a suitor to be, but he was steady, honest, and careful with her in a way that felt, over time, like a kind of tenderness she had not expected to find in a castle she had entered in chains. He also gave her something she had not thought to ask for, a way to send word home. Within her first week, a letter was carried down the mountain to Ashwell, written in her own hand, telling her family she was safe and unharmed. She saw the relief in Kale's eyes when she thanked him for it, as though her gratitude mattered to him more than she realized. But peace, Elira soon learned, was fragile in a world built on old fears and older grudges. A rival pack leader named Ronan Ashcroft had grown wealthy and powerful under the tribute system, profiting from the fear it created among human villages, who paid him tribute of their own to avoid similar fates. When word spread that Kale intended to end the tradition entirely, Ronan saw his influence slipping away, and he was not a man who accepted loss quietly. It began with whispers. Rumors spread through the castle and beyond that Elira had been seen fleeing the grounds in the dead of night, attempting to escape her arranged marriage. The rumors were false, planted deliberately, but under the old pack laws, an attempt to flee after being claimed as a tribute bride could be treated as betrayal, a crime carrying severe consequences that could be used to justify reinstating the very tradition Kale was trying to end. Elira learned of the rumors from a nervous servant girl who warned her just before the pack council was set to convene. Panic rose in her chest, sharp and immediate. She sought out Kale, finding him in his study poring over old documents, his jaw tight with barely controlled anger. "They're saying I tried to run," she said, breathless. "It isn't true. You know it isn't true." "I know," Kale said, standing immediately. "Ronan is behind this. He wants an excuse to challenge the marriage and reinstate the old law before I can dissolve it permanently. If the council believes you attempted to flee, they may demand a formal trial, and a trial gives him exactly the delay and chaos he wants. What do we do?" Kale looked at her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression, a decision being made. "We go before the council together, tonight, and we do not let there be any room for doubt about where we stand." The council chamber was filled with pack leaders from across the territory when Elira and Kale entered, side by side. Ronan stood near the front, his expression carefully composed, though Elira could see the calculation behind his eyes. He spoke first, presenting the rumor as fact, calling witnesses who claimed to have seen Elira near the castle gates in the night, insisting that tradition demanded consequences for a bride who tried to abandon her duty. Elira felt fear rise in her throat, but beside her, Kale remained steady, his presence a quiet reassurance. When it was his turn to speak, he did not raise his voice. He did not need to. "I have known Ronan Ashcroft for many years," Kale said, his voice carrying easily through the silent chamber. "And in all that time, I have never known him to act against his own interests. He claims concern for tradition, yet it is well known throughout this territory that Ronan profits more than any other leader from the fear the tribute system creates. Ending that system threatens his wealth, not his principles." He turned to face the assembled council. "Elira has not fled. She has not attempted to flee. She has spent every day since her arrival within these walls, and I will personally vouch for her whereabouts each night in question. If Ronan wishes to accuse her of betrayal, He must first explain why his witnesses cannot agree on a single consistent account of what they claim to have seen. One by one, under careful questioning, Ronan's witnesses contradicted themselves, their stories falling apart under the weight of scrutiny. It became clear to everyone in the chamber that the accusation had been fabricated, a desperate attempt to preserve a system that benefited only a few at the expense of many. Then Alira stepped forward, her voice trembling but clear. "I was taken from my home against my will," she said. "I will not pretend that arriving here was easy, or that I trusted the king who waited for me. But I have seen how he treats his people. I have seen how he treats me. Whatever this arrangement began as, I choose to stand here now, beside him, of my own will. Not because I was forced to, but because I have come to believe in what he is trying to build." The chamber fell silent. Ronan's face darkened with fury, but he had no argument left to make. The council, seeing the truth laid bare before them, dismissed the accusations entirely, and Ronan's influence, already weakened by his failed scheme, began to crumble in the days that followed. That night, in the quiet of the castle after the council had dispersed, Chaol found Alira standing at the window of her chambers, looking out over the mountains toward the distant lights of Ashwell. "You did not have to say what you said," he told her softly. "The council would have believed the evidence regardless." "I know," Alira said, turning to face him. "I said it because it was true." Something in Chaol's carefully guarded expression softened, and for the first time since her arrival, Alira saw not the Alpha King, not the feared ruler of the Blackthorn Pack, but simply a man who had spent years fighting alone for something he believed was right, and who had, perhaps without fully realizing it, stopped being alone the moment she chose to stand beside him. In the weeks that followed, Chaol made good on his promise. In a ceremony witnessed by leaders from every pack in the territory, he burned the ancient ledger that had recorded the names of tribute brides for generations, declaring the tradition ended for all time. No more daughters would be taken from their homes in fear. No more villages would live under the shadow of a debt they never agreed to owe. Alira returned to Ashwell for a visit not long after, and the joy on her family's faces when they saw her, safe, well, and smiling in a way they had not expected, was a memory she would carry with her always. Her mother wept with relief. Her father embraced her without the fear that had gripped him the day she left. But when the visit ended, Alira chose to return to the castle in the mountains, not because duty demanded it, but because somewhere in the candlelit halls and quiet mornings, she had found something she had not known she was searching for. She had arrived as a tribute, forced into a marriage she never chose. She left, in her heart, as a woman who had chosen her king freely, and who intended to build a future beside him, one no longer built on fear, but on trust earned slowly, honestly, and completely. The wedding, when it finally came, was not the frightened, hollow ceremony the old tradition would have demanded. It was filled with warmth, with laughter, with a village and a pack standing together for the first time in generations, no longer divided by fear, but united by the choice two people had made, to build something better than the world they had inherited. And in the years that followed, the story of the tribute bride who became a queen by choice, not by force, was told not as a warning, but as a promise that even the darkest traditions could be rewritten by those brave enough to demand something better.